So why do we avoid conflict? We're going to be talking about that and building empathy instead of judgment. Because if you're in a relationship with someone who avoids conflict, I know it's frustrating. But this video is also for you if you avoid conflict, because there's reasons for that. And in this video, I'm going to help you better understand the person who wants to avoid conflict and why that happens so that you can start to build empathy instead of judgment. And then in next week's video, I'm going to give you some tips on actually what to do to lessen that fear and start to be able to have those difficult discussions. But first, my name is Michelle Ferris. I'm a psychotherapist, and I love helping people create relationships that work. So people who avoid conflict tend to be really misunderstood in relationships because their partner often thinks that they don't care or that they're very disinterested in what's going on in the relationship, because the person who's conflict avoidant tends to want to go away. They don't want to deal with the conflict, and there's reasons for that. But it's not because they don't care. That's the biggest myth and misconception I hear, because what actually is happening is the person doesn't have the skills, and they think that by not participating in a conflict, they're actually preserving the relationship because they see conflict as bad, wrong, something to avoid. So imagine understanding them in this new way, that they're actually not doing this because they don't care. They're doing this because they care about the relationship, and they just see conflict as being something that could potentially destroy the relationship. Now, the other thing that happens is they appear disinterested. And this is often with my male clients, where they look disinterested because they don't want to participate in the conflict. But what's actually going on underneath the surface is they're experiencing that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. Now, if they're conflict avoidant, they're not going to do the fight. They're not going to get in there and want to resolve things. They're going to want to flee, or they're going to freeze up emotionally, or they're going to fawn, which means they will acquiesce in the moment and agree to anything to get you off their back. Not because they don't care, but because they see conflict as a potential destroyer of the relationship, and because they don't have the skills. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Because the two things that really impact somebody who's conflict avoidant is fear and a lack of skill. And I'm going to talk about both of those right now. But again, I want you to hold these as ways to build empathy, because I know this issue is really frustrating and it can be really easy to judge them and make a lot of negative assumptions about them not caring when actually that's not the case. So the first fear that they have is they are afraid of what could happen. This is kind of a global fear, fearing the worst is going to happen. It could be anything, but that fear of what could happen tends to make them freeze up. But if we don't catch that, those fears can really damage our relationships. But that's where they get stuck, is they just assume that if I have a conflict, my relationship is going to be threatened. So imagine if you're thinking that any type of conflict or difficult conversation is going to destroy your relationship, of course you're not going to want to have that, right? So that's where you can start to build empathy. Now, the second fear that I hear a lot is they're going to be mad at me. So they're going to go to great lengths to avoid this because they're assuming a negative outcome. So part of what I want you to challenge yourself with is that false evidence appearing real. It's an acronym from 12-step programs I refer to a lot, because basically what that means is what we fear rarely actually happens. So when we make these negative assumptions, we really get frozen in fear, and that doesn't help us. But the other thing you can do is challenge that fear and ask yourself, is there any basis to it? So if you're assuming that somebody's going to get mad at you, the question is, have they ever blown up and treated you poorly? Because if that person has never lost their temper with you, never really gotten angry at you, then you know it's probably false evidence appearing real. Now, the next fear is of being harmed or abused or in an unsafe situation. And often when there's a fear of that, it usually goes back to trauma. It usually goes back to experiencing some form of threat or violence in your past that makes you believe in the moment that conflict means that you're not going to be safe. Now, part of what I want you to do, if that's what's happening, is I want you to ask yourself, in this current relationship, do you feel unsafe? Is there any evidence that tells you you're unsafe? For instance, is the person abusive in any way? Are they making you feel bad or question your reality? Are they physically intimidating or doing anything physical to be abusive or scary to you? because that isn't false evidence appearing real. That's your gut saying this situation is unsafe. So if that fear is actually true, then you have to switch gears and focus on your safety, because that is paramount. If you feel unsafe in the relationship and there's evidence to support that, that's when you really need to get out and get some help. You don't want to get out of the relationship by yourself. Now, the next fear is fear of saying something wrong. This is so common. I hear this a lot, because part of what happens when people are afraid to do conflict is that they don't have the skills. They don't know how to communicate effectively. They don't know how to regulate their reactions, because they might get defensive in the moment, or they're afraid of losing their cool in the moment. So they decide instead, I'm just going to avoid it altogether, because then I don't have to risk losing control or my partner losing control. So part of what I want you to do there is consider that, this person, whether that's you or your partner, they really don't have the skills. And when somebody doesn't have the skills, that's not their fault. It doesn't mean they can't learn them, but so many people in the couples work I've done, the man, and it's mostly men, say to me, I just don't know what to say. They also say that they feel out-talked by the women. And this is a really interesting point, that women tend to out-talk men big time, because how girls get socialized is that they sit side by side and they chat and they talk about feelings a lot. Okay, that's how little girls get raised, is to talk about their experiences over and over again and have really deep conversations. So by the time women are adults, they have a lot more practice in these kind of conversations. Whereas little boys do what's called parallel play. That's where they play side by side with very little conversation. So of course, men don't typically get socialized to have deep conversations and to learn communication and listening skills, because men don't typically converse in that way, in that deep way. So part of what men need to realize is that they have to learn a different set of skills, but that's not their fault that they didn't learn them growing up. So part of what this is when you have a fear of conflict is it is absolutely about addressing the fears, and it's about the lack of skill. And both of those shouldn't be judgments. This isn't something we should judge somebody for being inept for. When people have a fear of conflict, or when people are conflict avoidant, I know it's super frustrating at times to be in a relationship with somebody who avoids conflict, because you feel like nothing gets resolved. But if you can start to understand that person and why they are the way they are, it's going to actually create an opening for you to have some empathy. And from that place, you can start to build something healthier. So for next week's video, I'm going to give you some specific tips on how to build some skill and gain confidence so that you're not afraid of conflict anymore. So be sure to hit the bell notice. I would love it. And then when the new video comes out, you'll be notified. Thanks so much. Bye.